Hello and welcome to another edition of the Radio Mechanic. And today on the bench we have yet another FTdx 5000 YAESU. This is a redo of a video I did quite a while back on changing the OLEDs, and we have another one here with dead OLEDs. Of course we do. This is going to be full bore, full length. I'm not going to try to cut this down like I did on the first one. It was too disjointed and I made too many mistakes trying to shorten the video up. For those out there who like to say I talk too much and my videos are too long, tough doo-doo. Go find another channel. I've had so many people tell me that they needed more detail on this repair and they didn't have the confidence to go in and do it by themselves. So we're going to take this thing apart one step at a time. I don't care how long this video runs this time. We're going to include every single step and give people the confidence they need to repair these YAESUs. I think it's ridiculous that you got to send it back to YAESU, and I don't know what they're charging these days, but it's several $100s plus parts to repair these things, and for the cost of the OLEDs you can do it yourself in a few hours. It's not that hard. I strongly urge you, if you've never done this, whoops, I just kicked the tripod. I strongly urge you, if you've never done this before, take a photograph of the front panel, print it out so you've got a copy of where all the knobs go, because there's several styles and shapes on the front of this receiver. It makes it a whole lot easier to put back together if you have a photograph. There's a couple of gotchas on the front panel of this. This is held on with 2 set screws, and behind it are a bunch of spring washers and graphite washers so that this has some drag, some feel to it when you turn it. This knob, the large knob closest to the main tuning knob, also has a set screw holding it in place. All of the rest of the knobs merely pull off. You're going to need a good quality, these are Bondis, 2mm Allen wrench to get this knob and this knob off. Don't buy dollar store Allen wrenches, you're just going to strip the screw heads out. Buy a quality set of Allen wrenches. These are Bondis. These are, in my opinion, some of the best made. Not a sponsor. And they won't strip your screws out, they won't twist, they won't break, etc. and so on. The first thing you're going to need to do to get those screws off, or the knobs off, get yourself a plastic screwdriver and gently tease underneath here, underneath the rubber on the front, and you'll be able to work this rubber band back, the rubber grip, I don't know what you want to call it, back far enough to expose the 2 holes in here that have the Allen screws or grub screws or whatever your choice of terminology. break them loose on this and here. Remember, there's 2 of them, and slowly, carefully pull the knob back. And as I do, here's one of the graphite washers I told you about, right there on the back side of the knob. There's 2 more spring washers. Every one of these I've taken apart so far has had 2 spring washers, and now there's a little plastic cup. When you pull it back, be careful. I'm going to need 2 hands here. Alright, am I in? Yes, I am frame. There's 2 spring washers, and in this case there's 2 more graphite washers. Sometimes I find 1, sometimes I find 2. And this little plastic cup. These are all here to give the knob some drag and some feel. Take note of how many and what, how they're organized. Remember how they come out. If you have to, take some notes. We're going to set this knob aside, and then we'll do the other one. Okay, we're going to take the knob, the large knob, there's 3 of them, the one closest to the main tuning dial, and it's going to be the same process. I'm going to take my plastic screwdriver and carefully work this band back, and it takes some patience. Don't be in a rush. This is an expensive transceiver. You don't want to do any damage. And we'll carefully work this back. It's hard to do with the camera in front of me. In fact, I might cheat. I'm going to go in here with a metal screwdriver and just be very careful and work this band back. Don't be tempted to push down on it and poke the screwdriver through the rubber. Just carefully work it around while you're pulling it back, and it will eventually come back and expose the set screw that's in the back. You only have to pull it forward far enough to find that set screw and break that one loose, and that knob comes off. There's a little spring right there, just leave it. You don't need to touch that. Now the rest of these knobs will just pull off. Wow, I'm surprised that didn't fall off on its own. And that one, that was pretty loose. Then we can come over to this end, move the camera down here, and remove the rest of these knobs. You have a bunch of these very tiny ones that have a second larger ring behind them or knob behind them, and you have 1, 2, 3 that appear to be the same. There is a difference. This knob pulls off and it has a round hole on the back of it, and it's serrated. That's for this meter switch. And when you put this back together, you're going to want to turn it all the way to one end, line the red knob up, or the red line up on the knob, and make sure that throughout its rotation it covers all of the settings. So just pull that off, and we'll put that in the jar over here to the side. And pull off these small knobs now. These can be a bear. Sometimes they're really tough to pull off, but all of these knobs, there's no set screws, there's no trick to getting them off other than really yanking on them. I gotta go grab a rag. I went and got a rag. This one happens to be a Harley-Davidson Thailand rag. Very helpful to have the Thailand on there to get the knobs off. These can be rough on the fingers, but the cloth, the rag, will give you a little bit of extra pull. And what this knob just did, and you have to be careful to watch for this, there's a little metal, there it is, there's a little metal clip inside of here. This one almost came off. If it slides out, just press it back into the knob, put it in your bucket, and continue down the line. That one barely moved. And again, it just takes, wow, that one's really on there. It takes some time and some force to get these things off. They're really on there, but they do just pull off. So we'll take all the front ones off first. Come on. Boy, these are toughies. And again, I am going to give you every step all the way on this, and if you think it's too long, tough. Everybody complained there wasn't enough detail on the last one. Push the little spring back in. That's unusual. That one's completely plastic. As is that one. There's no little metal ring in these two. Different design, I don't know. All the ones I've seen before had the metal ring in them. Then pull off the knobs, the secondary knob that's behind it. These larger ones can be a bear. There's a trick to getting them out as well. Take a piece of cloth, put it against the front panel, and you can catch the ring on the back side of the knob. Let me move it forward closer to the edge here. Yep, just dropped my Allen wrench. Protect the front panel. Hard to do with a camera in front of me. And gently pry from the edge that's on the back of the knob. There, it just moved, came off. Same thing here, protect your front panel. Pry it, there. It just came off. That takes care of the knobs. Now we will have to remove these control nuts, but I'm going to leave those in place for the moment so that I can handle this, flip it up and down without stressing the front plastic by only supporting it on its tabs. So I'm going to move the camera and we'll move on to the next step of this repair. Okay, next I'm going to remove the 10 screws that hold the top cover on. There's 3 on each side. There's 3 on the left, 3 on the right, 4 on the top. I'm going to be using a number 2 Phillips screwdriver of good quality. You want a very good quality screwdriver here, not one of those dollar store screwdrivers. Something with a very well formed machined tip on it. Now in actuality, I know somebody out there is already typing on the keyboard, these are JIS. These are Japan Industrial Standard screws. These are not true Phillips screws. But if you have a good quality Phillips screwdriver and you're careful, you set it down in there, put a lot of down force on the screwdriver so that you can't slip out of the screw, and just break it loose and you won't do any damage. As long as you're careful, you'll be fine with a number 2 screwdriver, number 2 Phillips. And we'll remove the top 10 screws. And I'll be back when those are finished. Alright, I've lifted the top cover off. Be careful you don't poke your finger through the speaker when you're manipulating this on the bench. And you should have a nice soft towel or cloth on the bench so you don't mar anything up. These are beasts. I'm going to stand it up. I'm going to move the camera over here to show you to the bottom. Okay, the bottom. Oh, kick the camera tripod again. Let's try to stabilize things. Tight quarters here in this room, and this is a big radio. There are 23, count them, 23 screws holding the bottom pan on this. And they're there to make an RF tight environment around different sections of the radio. These are much smaller in size than the ones that were on the top. However, they still take a number 2 Phillips. It's a big mistake that a lot of people make, is they see the smaller screw and they run off and get a number 1 Phillips and end up rounding out the screws. Test fit them. Stick it in the screw, apply some pressure. I'm going to spin this one out. This takes a number 2 Phillips. That screwdriver is fully seated in the head. There is absolutely no looseness whatsoever, and I can feel it going all the way to the bottom. It's a solid fit with a number 2. A number 1 would be loose. In fact, let me get a number 1. Here's a number 1 screwdriver. If I put it in there, there's a ton of play in the head of that screw. What's going to happen if you use a number 1, you're going to strip the head of the screw out and mar it up. It's going to look like doggy do. So I am going to continue. I'm going to remove all 23 screws, and then we'll carry on. Okay, what we have here is probably the hardest or trickiest part of this entire job, and it's getting a socket that will fit inside of this inner diameter well to take these control nuts off. This size here is more than ample, and I don't know why they just didn't carry this all the way down to the bottom, but they made a step here. And I suspect it's because they have a special tool and they figure it'll keep people from digging into it themselves. I know, conspiracy theorist. The inside diameter, this bottom of the well down in here, measures 15.25 millimeters or 0.600 inches, 0.6 inches. The thinnest wall socket I can get my hands on or nut driver that I can find is well above that. The thinnest one I found was 15.6 millimeters, and I need 15.25, or the equivalent, it's 14 thousandths oversized. It measures 0.614. So I sacrificed a socket. I have lots and lots of metric sockets. This happens to be 11 millimeters. So I sacrificed a socket. I took a socket and ground the walls down until it will fit down in that lower recess, and I can remove those nuts. Now I could have used a deep well socket, but I didn't want to destroy one of my good deep wells, and I had plenty of shallow 11 millimeter sockets, so I just sacrificed a great neck socket. Goes on the knob. There's still plenty of the drive, half-inch drive available to put a driver on it. I can stick it in the hole, break the nuts free, and spin them off. This can be done with a pair of needle nose pliers if you're extremely careful not to slip and mar up the edge of this hole, but this front panel is plastic. It doesn't take much to damage it. So if you're capable of doing this, turn a socket down. Now I did this very simply. I've got a stub that fits an electric drill. It's for driving sockets with a drill driver. And I just spun it against my belt sander until the diameter came down. I don't have a lathe. So I'm going to pull all of these control nuts off, put them in the jar along with the screws, and we'll pick up from there. Take note that the meter switch, while still an 11 millimeter nut, has a different size thread and a smaller washer. So when it goes back together, you're going to want to put the washer with the smaller hole and the nut with the smaller diameter, internal diameter, on that one. Also, it will appear that the ring or the nut on the microphone connector would have to come off. It does not. You can leave that in place. The panel will pull off without that coming off. Okay, we have all the knobs off. The control nuts have been removed. Make sure you get all of the washers and there's no loose components, because when this front panel tips down, anything that's you haven't taken out and safely put in a jar or in a container is going to end up on the floor and could roll away and disappear on you. There's 2 screws on the side, 2 screws on tabs here on the top, and 2 screws on the far side. Now we are not going to remove the bottom screws on the side. What we will do is remove the top screw on both sides first. Let me get around behind the camera here. And once those have been removed, we are going to merely loosen the 2 screws that you see on these tabs here. Support the front panel and back these off about 3 turns. These do not have to be removed. Once you've done that, this panel will merely flip down. If you have your radio sitting so that it's hanging over the edge of the bench, like it is here, and you've got a towel to protect the plastic, let the towel hang over the edge so you don't damage the front bezel. You can drop the thing down and it'll give you access to all the ribbon cables and all the connectors on the inside of the unit here. Now that our front panel has been hinged down, we have access to the connectors that connect the front panel to the transceiver itself. We've got 2 ribbon cables coming down here that are held in place by this little clip. Don't disturb this clip. Just gently grab these down as close to the connector as you can. Pinch them good and tight. Rock them back and forth gently, very gently. You don't want to damage these. Now those are unplugged. And you can see just from the way they fall, whoops, That's not in frame very well. There we go. Just from the way they fall from this plastic clip, that they'll fall naturally right back where they belong. Take pictures. Take lots of photographs before you take it apart if you're not comfortable doing this. That way you'll be able to tell where everything goes later on. You could also take a Sharpie and put a little dot on the back cable and put a little dot here on the circuit board where the ground plane area is, and you'll know the one with the dot goes to this connector, the one without the dot goes over here. But just leave them in the plastic clip. They can sit right there. They're fine. We have a couple of audio cables. I love the way the Japanese lay things out. Their system design is so nice. We have some audio cables here for the microphone and the headphone jack and so on and so forth. These have to be removed as well. We've got 2 tie wraps. Take note of how the cables are laid out, and we're going to nip those 2 tie wraps. And I've got to reach over here to get my cutters. Okay, being extremely careful so that we don't cut into the wires themselves and we only get the tie wraps. We're going to very gingerly come in here and just nip the tie wraps off. There's one. I'll come over here and get this other one. And I'm doing this keeping my points of my, near the gray jacketed audio cables, because if you do make a mistake, they're probably going to be a little bit more forgiving. And I'm going to remove this tie wrap. We'll replace these when the receiver goes, or the transceiver goes back together. Now we have this cable, which goes down to the little connector down below. And I want to point out something here. There's an empty 6-pin connector right here. So when it comes time to put it all back together, don't freak out and wonder where the missing cable is. This is an open connector. To be honest, I don't know what it's for. It's probably some option, or maybe it's for programming the microprocessor on this front panel. I don't know. But it's not used, or it's not filled, so don't worry too much about it. I'm going to, am I in frame? Yeah. I'm going to tease this little connector out here. That's one of the gray cables that goes in. It's got a little black one running next to it. It goes into the transceiver, so that frees that up. And then down here, and it's a little hard to get to, and don't tug these out by the wires, because you're going to end up with heartache if you try to pull these out by the wires. You pull a wire out of one of those connectors and you're going to be in trouble. But we're just gently going to tease that connector out of the board. And I'm just using little screwdrivers because I can't get my fingernail down in there. And it can probably come in from the back side as well. There we go. There. I just tease that little connector out. There's the other gray wire that goes up into the transceiver itself. Those are your only connections between this entire front panel and the transceiver. Now that we've removed these 2 little jacks and these 2 ribbon cables, we can remove the 2 screws on the end over here, support your front panel, take out these 2 screws, and we can completely remove the front panel from the transceiver. Where's my number 2? There it is. I'm going to have to move the camera to do this, but all I'm going to do is remove the 2 screws on the end so that I have the front panel in my hands. Alright, the front panel has been removed from the radio. We can gently set it on our towel here so we don't mar up anything on the front of the radio. Bear in mind, with all these control nuts loose, these controls are floating in here, so don't drop this hard on the face. These have to be loose so that the panel can separate from this subframe or sub-chassis or whatever you want to call it. But they're just loose in here, so don't put any great pressure on here. And we're going to have to start disconnecting some ribbon cables internally here. It looks a lot scarier than it really is. Everything, again, it's a Japanese design. Everything is pretty much going to fall where you expect it to. And we'll get into the details of doing all of this, and we'll try to take it slow. Again, take photographs from a couple of different angles, and if you're uncomfortable, you can always make a 1 and a 1 and a 2 and a 2 on the ribbon cables, so you know where everything plugs in. Most of these ribbon cables are going to have a reinforcement area like this little blue strip right here. You want, when you remove these types of cables, you want to get down as close to that as you can and pinch it good and firm and rock them gently. Don't pull on the ribbon cable itself. If you break those cables, you're going to be in trouble. But we're gently going to get into removing all of those in just a second. We'll start the disassembly of the front panel here. Now I am wearing a wrist strap, which is unusual. I used to wear an ankle strap, but one too many times getting up and trying to walk away with it. It's no longer functional. We're going to do this, hopefully, in an order which will make it very easy to put back together. Now we have, coming from over where the microphone connector is, we have this 6-pin cable here, which we're going to gently tease out of this. I call this an interconnect board or an interface board. I'm going to remove that. Now remember, the two cables, main cables from the radio, were here. So we're going to disconnect this. This cable I'm going to disconnect from down here so that it remains with this board, and when it comes back it will fall naturally into the position where it belongs. We're going to leave these cables connected to their encoders, and we're going to remove them from here, and again they will pretty much naturally fall right back where they belong. It's pretty hard to get them confused. These belong to these, you know, all of your front panel controls that we pulled the knobs off earlier. I'm going to remove this one from this end. Is that still in frame? Yeah. Okay. We're going to leave it on this board. Same with this one. I'm going to pull this from down below and leave it on this board. That way it pretty much falls right back into where it has to plug into. It makes it a whole lot easier to put back together. We have a couple of connectors here to pull. This one's going to stay on here and be removed from down below. Where's my little screwdriver gone? There it is. Don't pull on the wires, as tempting as it is. I'm just supporting them as I remove the connector. I'm gently, there we go, gently prying it out. So that one's out. That's going to fall directly where it belongs. This one's out. It's going to line up directly where it belongs. And we'll get this board out of here. Get this out of our way. This has to be removed for access to everything that's underneath. There's a flat washer and a split lock washer. Just keep track of where your hardware is going. And is a wrist strap absolutely needed? I don't think there's anything all that static sensitive in here, but it's better safe than sorry. And these are expensive radios. I don't want to have to buy anything or buy somebody's radio from them because I blew up a chip. Okay, that's removed. We can set that aside, get that out of our way. We can pull these encoder boards out. Just remember which way the circuit boards are facing. In fact, I don't think it'll fit the wrong way around. No, it won't. So you can't mess that up. It can only fit in one way. That one has 4 controls. This one has 5 controls. And again, it won't fit the wrong way around anyway. So you can't mess up on how that goes back in there. Very simple. We can remove this connector here. I'm trying to cut as few tie wraps as possible. We're going to have a small one here, this tiny little ribbon cable here. This goes to the S-meter display. That's unplugged. We'll leave that connected here so we don't lose it. These brown wires going down to this little connector, we'll have to pop this connector out. And again, gently and slowly, just take your time, have a little patience. That one's worked out. So we've removed that connector. we've got a loop right here. This will have to be pulled. And you can leave one end of it in there if you'd like. If you're feeling brave, you can remove both ends of it. When it comes time to put it back in, you just have to make sure you feed it through the hole and don't bend it. We've got a connector over here on the far end. This will have to be lifted up. This is so, actually, does that one have to come out? I'm not 100% sure on that. That goes to those two controls. Yeah, that'll have to come out. That has to be disconnected so the board can lift away from it. It's been a while since I've done this. I had more or less retired. Wally, this is your set, by the way, if you're watching. So you're seeing me learn all over again. I hope that gives you lots of confidence in me. Come on, I'm gonna tease this one out. There we go. That one's unplugged. This probably has to come out as well. We'll leave one end of it connected because you can see there's another board layer down below there. I reviewed what I had jotted down, and we do need to remove the S-meter. We're going to remove this board. We're going to remove this board, and 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think 1, 2, 3 screws have to come out. A couple more connectors. We'll get there. It has been a while. Oh, wrong screwdriver. The S-meter, does it have to come out? Yeah, I don't know if it's 100% necessary, but it is kind of hooked over here under the panel. It gives us less to worry about when we put it all back together. So, we'll take these out. Am I in frame? Just about. There we go. Got those out. We'll remove the S-meter. And it is hooked in here. It makes the front panel come off easier. So there's our S-meter. That's out of the way. We'll take this board out of the way. And a lot of these screws go through to the plastic. And that's why it's necessary to remove a lot of this stuff. Okay, that's out of the way. You can see those screws holding this encoder set. Am I in frame here? I hope. Yeah, holding that encoder set go through into the plastic bezel, as does this one here. That has to come out. These have to come out over here. Again, am I still in frame? I hope so. Get some more light over here. These have to come out. It's been probably 3 years since I've done one of these. And just to make life easy, I'm probably going to pull this one out too, just to get it out of the way. Whoops, where'd my wrist strap connector go? Not very much use. There is a little processor on this board, so use a little care. The more stuff that's off of here, the easier it is to deal with. Plus, while you're in here, you can clean any dust that's in here. Oh, one more screw, dummy. Okay. That's removed. That actually looks nice and clean. So we'll set that aside. We won't get any fingerprints on it. Move that over here where it's out of the way. At this point, oh, two more connectors. I'm being stupid again. I said earlier we had to remove these, and I haven't done it yet. I'm just going to gently tease these out. These are probably the only two on here where it's a bit ambiguous, or it isn't really clear where they're going to fall when they go back in, but if you don't disturb the wires, it should fall neatly in hand. And again, you can put a little dot on one of them so that you know which one's which, but they'll pretty much stay where they belong. Okay, we've removed all the screws going through to the plastic. We should, at this point, be able to start gently teasing all of these little tabs off. If you look real close, there's a little metal hook that these plastic tabs connect to. So I am just gently, ever so gently, gonna lift that one up, lift that one up, and we're gonna work our way around a little at a time. As we disconnect these, there we go, click, 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 those four are off. And again, I'm using my thumb to apply force over here. Let me get it in frame, and I'm pushing in on the microphone jack, and it gives you some leverage to pull it forward. And I'll do this one more time, just to snap everything back in. And let's see here. Okay, I'm going to put my thumb here, my finger on the microphone jack, and lift. That one unclipped, that one unclipped, that one unclipped, that one unclipped. Then we're going to turn it over, and I'm going to put my fingers through the hole here and push with my thumb and gently, gently, come on, get under there. Got to be careful, you don't want to break these. There's one, there's two, there's three, there's four. Now we can separate this from the front display. A lot of bits and pieces. It's all nuts and bolts and screws, folks. There's nothing really scary about this. You don't need to know anything about electronics. You don't need to have a degree in physics. It's simple screws, nuts, and so on and so forth. Okay, now that this is opened up, we need to take the panel out where these three are located. Again, we've left these ribbon cables intact so that we know where they plug back into when that panel is back on here. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I think it is. Oops, 16 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, yeah, 16 screws. And we're just going to remove all of these little screws, and I'm using my number 1 Phillips on these, and I'm just going to set these right over here because these will be going back in shortly. And I won't bore you with all of them. We'll remove them and come back. Okay, the screws have been removed and set in a little pile over here, because these will be the first ones going back in, so I'm going to keep them all in a little group, make sure I have them all. Lift this panel out. This is just your button panel, and we'll set that aside in a safe place where it's nice and cushioned. Now we have to remove the OLED board. Okay, so this has to come out to replace your OLEDs. So I'm going to take the screws out of here. Okay, and I've removed the screws that are holding the OLED display in. Now, it should be noted here, don't remove the screws that are on the green printed circuit board. There's no need to take those out. Only the ones that are on the black plastic portion of the display. And then you should be able to tease this board out of here. Word of caution, don't tip this panel over. You'll probably, yeah, all the keys will fall out. If you tip this thing over, all the buttons are going to fall out, and then you're going to wonder what the heck went where. There's our display. And boy, these look rough. I've never seen a set that looked like that. That one looks fine, but it wasn't lighting up at all. I hope there isn't something else wrong with this. I've never seen these look almost burned. That's kind of suspicious looking. That's kind of suspicious looking. This one was lighting ever so slightly, but it wasn't really displaying anything. But these really look like they've been taking a beating. I'm going to set this aside very gently. Again, we don't want to scratch anything. I'm going to put it over here. Actually, no. I'm going to put it on another towel on the other side of the room here for a moment. Hang tight. Okay. The OLEDs are here. They're held down with double-sided tape. And the connectors are here. Now, what you're going to have to do, I've got a brand new, fresh out of the box, single edge razor blade. We're going to have to cut this Kapton tape that's holding these little black levers down. Let me get this up close and personal here and see if I can get rid of the reflections, get the lighting right. This camera usually does a pretty good job. Try to get the angle just right. Let me try to get, I want to make sure you get as good a view of this as you can. It's hard to tell in the viewfinder. We've got this yellowish Kapton tape holding everything down. This little black stripe right here is a release lever for the ribbon cable. So what we're going to do is gingerly cut through the Kapton tape and then flip the little lever up like that. Now the Kapton tape has probably got the ribbon cable still captured here. So I'm going to gingerly, since we know this display is no good, there we go. That's unplugged. We've unplugged the first OLED, bad OLED. Got the little lever pulled up. I'm going to do the next one. Very gingerly cut the tape. And because they've overlapped it here, I'm going to just make a pass. And gingerly lift the little lever up. Don't use a lot of force. I'm going to pull this ribbon cable out. Second OLED display disconnected. And we're going to come over here to the third one. This one the tape stops short, so this one I think I'm just going to be able to flip the lever up. Release that cable. This one should just pull right out. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to flip it over. And I'm very gingerly, am I still in frame here? I hope so. Not too many reflections. This is tough to do. I am just going to begin to gently and slowly lift, pull on that. And the tape will give up. And you can see the tape remained behind. Didn't even damage the sticky tape. So there's one. And you got to just do this slowly so the adhesive has time to release. In fact, before that adhesive gets dirty, well, no, I'll put them all in at once. Do the same thing with the next OLED. Slowly, slowly, just apply a little up pressure. Constant, slow pressure. And 9 times out of 10, you're not even going to have to replace the tape. There we go, I felt it give. You just got to be patient. And again, the adhesive tape is just fine. I've never had any problems reusing the tape, and I know people out there are going to go nuts saying, oh, you should replace the tape. I've never had to, and I've never had a problem on any of these. And once the display's back in place, everything's captive anyway. I think the tape is mainly for assembly processes. Slowly apply pressure. I'm just going to let the tape slowly give up on its own. There it goes. I'm not forcing it. I'm just slowly applying a little pressure on it. Boom. 3 OLEDs removed. We'll cut open the package. We have our new OLED displays. The customer supplied these. He contacted YAESU and got them. Brought me the radio and the parts. Alright, I'm going to get the camera a little bit higher so we got a bigger field of view. And you've seen most of the details, or all of the details you need to see. Cut the package open. And these are all the same part number, so you don't have to worry about which one goes where. It's got a little protective film over the face of it. We'll leave that there for now. I'm going to drop this display in. Squeeze it against the tape. There's one. Come on, guys, get out of the bag. I know you've been comfy in there for a while, but it's time to go to work. This one's being stubborn. Come on, come on. There we go. All right. Just carefully line it up. Stick that one in. There's display number 2. And display number 3. All snugly nestled in their little beds. And I'm going to leave the film on there until I'm completely done so I don't get fingerprints all over these. Now, this is tricky. You got to gently curl these things over and get these connectors. You got to tease them back into their all right, come on. There, no, not quite. Let me get my my cheaters. Where are my cheaters? Hang tight. The old man needs. All right, I found my cheaters. Now I'll be able to see what I'm doing. We in frame here? Good. This is going to be hard to get on camera. These are very tiny. Okay, that one just slid in. Once you get the angle right, they'll just slip right in. And I'm going to close the latch down on that one. So that one's installed. Gently curve the ribbon cable around. Don't make any sharp bends in it. There, that one just slid right in. There's 2 little tabs. You can probably see them. One here, one here. When they come up against the connector, you know you're seated all the way into the connector. Close down the little black latch. That one's solidly connected. Nice little arc, no sharp bends in the ribbon cable. Carefully arc the last one around. And it's springy. It wants to keep coming back on you, so you have to convince it to bend over in an arc. Come on, get it lined up. There you go. Once it's lined up, because the latch is open, once you have it lined up properly, it'll just basically fall into the connector. And that one's done. Now I'm going to cut some little strips of Kapton tape just to make sure everything stays connected. Is it necessary? Probably not, but I have the Kapton tape. You could use Scotch tape if you wanted to, but it's just to ensure that the ribbon cable doesn't slip out, and we're going to make it as factory as possible. So I'll cut some strips of Kapton tape and we'll seal this, put this assembly back together. Just before I do, I'll remove these little plastic protectors. Alright, I have my Kapton tape, and the reason I said use Scotch tape if you want a little roll like this of legitimate Kapton tape is about $36. This stuff is not cheap. It is extremely tolerant of high temperatures, and it has a tenacious adhesive that just doesn't seem to give up. But it is priced out of this world. However, in an application like this, you know it's going to stay there for just about ever and not give up on you. So, we'll put a little piece of Kapton tape on here. In fact, there's enough length here I could probably make two, but I'll just trim it off. Am I still in frame? I hope so. Oh, pull the old piece of Kapton tape right off. That's good. That means we get a fresh start. Okay, I'm just going to stick that down. I'm not even going to try to trim it. That's one. I know they sell cheaper versions of this on eBay, but you know, I don't believe buying Chinesium Kapton tape is the way to go. If you're going to spend the money at all, buy the real thing. And this one I will trim because the connector was in the way. I don't want it coming around the front. So that one's securely in, and we've got one more. This is overkill, believe me. They'll never come apart on their own, but the factory did it, so let's do what the factory did. And I cut that one a little bit wide. Let's trim that down. That's better. And we'll just make sure that we never ever have a problem here. Yeah, perfect. 3 OLEDs in and ready to go. Now, the reinstallation. Well, let me get cleaned up here. Alrighty, just before we put these back in, I'm going to take a little bit of canned air. Make sure there's no dust in there. We don't want anything showing up after we get this all back together. It would suck to have to take it all apart again. Where'd I put my tweezers? Up there. Yeah. So we'll take the little protective film off of these now that we're ready to install them. These are perfectly clean. No fingerprints. And we'll set the board down in position and put the screws back in it. Now here's a little secret, and I try to get this out to everybody. When you put screws back in, these are little self-tapping screws, and particularly when you're going in the plastic, don't just put them down there and start turning them, because you're going to cut a new thread and remove more plastic, and there won't be anything for the screw to hang on to. Turn them backwards. And you probably won't be able to hear that, but click, it just fell into the original thread, and it's turning in with absolutely no resistance. And it's down at its bottom, just about. Okay, so that one's in. I'm going to take another one. I'm going to put it in there. I'm going to turn it backwards. Click. No resistance. It's going right in. If it's resisting you, back it up and let it drop in a second time. A lot of these are double cut threads. And if it doesn't go in right the first time, it'll usually go the second time. Turn it backwards. Click. Going in. It just fell right in. That way you're not cutting a new thread every time and removing plastic. Very important in these front panel displays. Anything that's threaded in the plastic. So, we have our new OLEDs. Make sure there's no dust or dirt in here. We don't want any hairs or anything showing up on display. Clean it up. I am going to put our button board back in. And it's going to be the same process with the button board I just did with the OLED display. All of the screws, turn them backwards until they fall into their original thread. And they should go in with no effort at all. They should just glide right back down. Now, I'm not going to tighten any of these until they're all in place. Because if there's any misalignment, you want the board free to float around a little bit on the screw. And when they're all about one turn from being bottomed, then I'll go in and tighten them up. But again, turn them backwards until you hear the little click, or you'll feel the little click as it drops into the original thread that was cut. And they'll go in with zero effort. They'll thread right down. Do that every time and you'll never have to worry about stripping the screws out of your plastic panel. I'm going to turn the camera off, finish this section, and then we'll move on. Okay. Our button panel has been reinstalled. Next we'll take our little front panel here. Actually, before they've got an adhesive. I wanted to make sure that these two encoders weren't loose before they went back in. So we're good to go. And as we start to set this down in here, we have to make sure that we get our ribbon cables up through their holes. That one's up and through. This one's okay just like it is. Remember, there's another board layer here that we'll be dealing with. Okay, that's back in. Now I'm going to put the main display in. Again, just one more time, make sure there's no dust. Wally would never forgive me if I give it back to him with dust in his display. No fingerprints, no scratches. Okay, let's put this back in. And again, did I strictly have to take this out? No, but I wanted to make sure it was off and safe while I was working. And everything went back together clean. So I'm going to put the screws back in that. And as we put this display board in, even though this is threading into sheet metal, these are self-tapping screws. Every time you screw them in, they're going to want to cut a new thread. And the same thing applies. You do that 2 or 3 times without using, if you don't back them up, you'll eventually end up cutting all the metal away. Now that started to bind after about half a turn. Clicked again, binding, there. Nope, yep, there it goes. Now it's going in. So we've got that one started. I've got that one started. And so on down the line. Nope, come on, get in there. try the other screw on that one. There is some variation in these screws. Sometimes you'll find one doesn't want to start. That's certainly going into the original hole. Okay, when we get this done, we'll move on and start installing the rest of the electronics. I want to take one last look and make sure that any dirt or dust that's on here is on the outside and not on the inside. And I don't see anything inside there. I know it's hard to see on camera. There's, of course, you know, normal wear and tear on the outside as there are on these. But I see nothing internally. We should be good. Okay, S-meter. I'm going to put this back in. We'll slip this down, and this hooks in behind the panel. Am I in frame here? I hope so. Okay, why are you being difficult? You came out with no problem. Let's put the meter down in there, then we'll put this in. How's that? There we go. Drop the meter in first. Let that be a lesson to you. Drop the meter in first, then put the little white plastic part. And we'll pull out 3 more screws of the self-tappers for the sheet metal. And we'll be back when this is done. Okay, the S-meter has its mounting screws installed. I've plugged in the 2 connectors here. That's for the tuning encoder. And I think this is secondary, yeah, clarifier VFOB. That's your secondary tuning encoder. So the 2 encoders are plugged in. That's done. We can plug this loop back in because the metal subframe is in place. So we'll gently tease this cable back into its connector. That's plugged in. I think, yeah, there's nothing to stop me from plugging this one in anymore. Both layers of circuit board are here. And you want to be careful with these, not to kink them, not to bend them, just rock them gently and they'll slide into their connectors. Takes a little patience and a little time, just don't get in a hurry. We'll drop in, we in frame here, we're going to drop in our encoders for volume and squelch and all of that stuff. Get those dropped down in there. Our S-meter ribbon cable can go in, and I'm probably going to use my tweezers on this one. Am I in frame here? I hope so. It's a tiny little connector. This all should be pretty much self-explanatory as you're doing it. And it's pretty hard to get some of this on camera. Okay, that one's in. I'm just going to get a little bit better bite on it here and make sure. Yep, that's all the way down. Get this one. That's all the way in. Okay. So that ribbon cable's in. Now we can take. Did I get? Oh, we can put that board back in because this will help attach the front panel. There's my tweezers again. There they are. Two more of the little self-tapping screws. Plug that connector in. I'm hoping all of this stays in frame. I'm forgetting to look up here at the viewfinder. Alrighty, some more self-tappers. I'm just going to put the screws in this and we'll be back. I know somebody out there is screaming at me right now, but I realized my mistake before I went any further. If you look, these are actually threaded machine screw holes. And I actually realized that just as I pressed the stop button on the camera. So, we'll drop these 4 in here. These are the ones I mentioned earlier, have the split locks and flat washer attached to the screw. Just make sure none of them fall off. There's a lock washer and a flat washer on there. And I do the same thing even with the machine screws. If you probably notice, I turn them backwards until I hear them drop into the thread. There it goes. If you don't hear it, you'll feel it when it happens. That way you don't cross thread anything. Okay, this ribbon cable will go right down here where it came from. It'll fall right back into its old position. And I am gently going to do this with a pair of small pliers on the reinforced section here. I know somebody's screaming at me, but you can't really reach in there with your hand. Okay, that one's plugged in. We'll plug this one in. That's seated. It's all about being gentle, letting it find its way down in. Don't get carried away. We have this connector here that we're going to drop down. And again, you can see it pretty much falls. Is that in the camera view? I hope so. These pretty much are going to fall right back into where they belong. In fact, I can put the top in first. It doesn't matter. That plugs in. And that one's in. That's plugged. This little white one lines right up with where it belongs. It's, you know, again, Japanese design. It's pretty hard to make a mistake. Everything is pretty much going to go where it belongs. The little cable with the brown wires, again, it's within a couple of millimeters of where it belongs. You just, you know, it falls right back into its position. As long as you don't go stretching and bending the wires, everything should pretty much fall right back. Put this little guy down in here. Hard to do with the camera in the way here, but alright, that one's in. This connector comes up here. You can see it reaches right over where it belongs, and it's the only connector in the area that is anything like it. We have our encoder connector here. Again, there's a little reinforced area on these that you want to hold them from. See the little blue piece on the back? Is that in the camera? Yeah. It's a little reinforced area. Let you get a hold of the cable. Excuse me. And push it in. Swing this guy around. This one goes down here. And that one's plugged in. All right. Looking good. And again, we have another blank connector over here. Don't panic on that one either. Whether those are programming cables or what they're for, test, I don't know. So you've got a blank one there, and you've got the blank 6-pin over here. Now, while it's on the table, like this, you could go ahead while you have access to the back of the thing, and you can hold the controls in place. You can see them wiggling there in the camera. I've got my thumb on or finger on the back. I'm going to go ahead and put the washers and the control nuts in here and fasten those into place so that's done. Here's a little hint. When you're putting the control nuts back on, I am not going to use the ball that I use to take them out. I just put a turn of painter's tape around the socket, and that will give me more than enough grip to tighten these as much as they need to be tightened. Because if you go too tight, it's easy to strip them out and or crack the plastic on the front panel. So that's more than tight enough. Those are never going to come loose. I'll wait to put the knobs on until the front panel is reinstalled. It's less stuff that I'm holding on to, but the assembly is just the reverse of when you saw me take it apart. I'll put the 2 screws back in the end, hang it from there. I'll plug in these 2 ribbon cables and the connectors that go in over here, and I'll replace the tie wraps. And I'll bring you back when I'm ready to put the tie wraps in. It's pretty self-explanatory at this point. This is not, you know, whoops, I forgot one screw. I just noticed one screw right here. And we'll put this all together. No, I missed more than one screw. I missed the 2 that are down here. I'm being a dumbass. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So I've got to replace these 2 screws down here, and then this will be done and ready to go back in the unit. So we'll see you when I got this hung back on the front panel and it's ready to go. Alright, the panel is hanging by its hinge screws again. We'll put these, am I in frame? Probably just barely here. Turn it down a little bit, there we go. We'll put these 2 ribbon cables, the ones that fall right where they belong. Actually, I put this one in first. It should be easier to get my thumb on the other one than my 4 fingers over here, but okay. That's firmly plugged in. That's firmly plugged in. Then we have our 2 gray wires here to be plugged in. We've got the one with the little tiny connector that goes down below. That's in its home. We've got the one that goes up here. Is that in frame, I hope? I know my big fat hands are in the way, but only so much I can do. That one's plugged in. Now we want to put some cable ties back on the wires so that everything is back to like it was when it left the factory. So we've got some cable ties here, and it's pretty tight quarters down there, but I'm going to show you a little trick. Take your cable tie and a small diameter screwdriver and do that a couple times. Now your cable tie will hook around and come back up to you, and if you do that several times, it'll almost make a loop. Then I can just stick it down underneath here, hook it around, and it'll come right back out to me. Oh, it's hooked on the ribbon cables there. That makes it a whole lot easier to get your tie wrap back in position when you got tight quarters. I'm not going to snug that up completely yet. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to do the same thing with it. Take the screwdriver, make it curl around on itself. Then I can hook it down underneath and come right back up and out and grab the other end of it and close that down. Oh, I didn't catch the little strip. There we go. The little zip strip. We'll get everything laid in nice and neat, all the wires in position, and then we'll snug them up so that they stay there. And that's done. Indistinguishable from the factory. And we'll cut the cables off like so. Tuck it back down behind the board, and no one will ever know you've been in there. They'll open it up and think it's factory fresh. Okay, I'm going to flip the cover back up. There we go. And just lift up gently on the sheet metal so it goes up on top. And I'll snug these two top screws down just so it doesn't flop over anymore. Just be careful you don't drop your screwdriver or poke your thumb through the speaker. And there's a bunch of ribbon cables and connectors underneath you want to be wary of. Don't grab underneath when you go to lift this thing. Grab it from the sides. You wouldn't want to break a connector off one of the RF boards. That could get expensive. Alright, we should have two more flathead self-tappers. We do. It's a little off camera, but I mean, I think you know how to put screws in. Same routine, backwards, click, threads right in. And because these are JIS screws, I'm going to apply a lot of downforce on the screwdriver when I snug these in so that it doesn't cam out of the head of the screw. We don't want to damage the screw heads. JIS screwdrivers are going to pay anywhere from $36 to, I've seen them as much as $100 for a set of JIS screwdrivers. And I'm not talking about Chinesium junk. I'm talking about genuine made in Japan screwdrivers. Probably worth having. I should have a set, but I have probably 50 different sets of standard screwdrivers, and they're all cut a little bit different. And I always seem to find ones that work very well with the JIS screws, but I'll probably order a set just so I can say I own them. Okay, before we put the covers on, we'll power it up, make sure everything's working, then we'll put the knobs on and be done. Okay, power up. Moment of truth. Haha! 1, 2, 3. OLED displays are back in business. Beautiful. Everything's working. Yes. Yes. Okay. I must have the RF gain. Where's the RF gain control? Right there. Yeah, the S-meter was up one. Which led me to believe, I bet the squelch is set too because I'm not hearing anything. I've turned all your knobs, Wally. Had to. Sorry, buddy. There we go. Squelch is off. In the process of pulling all the knobs, I'm sure I have absolutely upset all your favorite settings, but hopefully, does this radio, I'm not even sure if this one allows you to save it on a card. I don't see a SD card on the slot. At any rate, I'm sure you know how to operate your own radio. I'm going to put the covers on it, put the knobs on it, and call this one done.
The 10 to 20 kilowatts and water cooled, and then even sometimes they cool by pushing the air under the foundation out of the building.
And there you have it, folks. Your classic FTdx 5000 OLED repair. If you own an FTdx 5000, you will have to do this at some point. They all die. I don't know why they're using OLEDs and not backlit LCD, but not my call. I didn't design it. The OLEDs have a seemingly short lifespan where a backlit LCD will probably outlive you and me. And that does it. And if I may plagiarize Eric O over at South Main Auto, my favorite mechanic, remember, folks, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching. See you later.